back, Start the Thing family. So excited to connect with you again today. If you are new to the show, my name is Rob, and I'm so glad you're listening. In this space, we talk about side hustles and learn from folks who have been successful in this space, including chatting with folks who have turned their side hustles into full-time businesses. Today, we have a special guest, the friend of the show, who skipped the side hustle and dove full-time into a full-time career as a personal trainer. Start the Thing family, please welcome Alexa to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Such a blast. And Start the Thing family, total transparency here. Alexa is a family friend. Alexa and my bride studied together at Valdosta State in the master's program for exercise physiology, and we got to know Alexa and Nico. So super pumped to
hmm
have a friend join us on the show today. So Alexa, thank you for being here. Before we
Yeah,
jump into personal training straight away, it'd be great, I think, for people to hear a little bit of your background and maybe how that led to getting into this personal training business.
yeah. So I've always had an athletic background. So I started doing gymnastics when I was actually about 8 or 9, which for any gymnasts out there, that's actually kind of old. Which for anyone that doesn't know gymnastics, they're like, oh wow, that's so young. But for any gymnasts, they're like, wow, that's kind of old to start. I continued through that. So obviously, that took up like 20 hours of my week for throughout all of high school, most of middle school, all of that. I continue into college. So I did gymnastics at the University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh. Um, Throughout that, like all athletes, I just kind of always had injuries. So nothing out of the normal, but just sprained ankles, kind of various injuries. I would say that's what kind of initially sparked my interest is just kind of dealing with all of those things. In college, my junior, so I had surgeries throughout the
As,
previous time,
as
but
most
not
gymnasts
my
do, right?
yeah, exactly. So during my junior year of college, I dislocated my elbow on bars. And then I pretty much called it after that, where I was like, I have one more year left. Like, should I go through a surgery to do something about it, or what should I kind of do here? So I ended up, my coach put me on staff. And so I ended up, after that, I recovered. So I used like our athletic trainers and things like that in our whole facilities. But then I became or a part of our strength conditioning program.
Oh,
So I
cool.
helped program for the strength and conditioning side of things. And then I also kind of just assistant coached. So like wherever she kind of needed me, I preferred bars. It's funny because bars was the only thing that I really ever got seriously injured on. And that was still always my favorite. And it's probably because I would just wing it and go for things. So yeah, I'd prefer bars, but I'd kind of just go wherever she needed me, whatever she needed me to do. And I did that all throughout my senior year.
Got
So
it.
that was kind of my college experience, my undergrad. And then after that, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I'd heard of people, they were like, yeah, they got people have gotten master's degrees for free. They haven't paid for them. And I was like, that's wild. Like I've paid for all 4 years of this college. Like that's crazy. So that's where I met Lindsay is at Valdosta State. So I ended up doing a graduate assistantship in the CEMER, which is the Center of Exercise Medicine and Rehabilitation at Valdosta State. So I did that, got my master's there, and then just kind of continued on from there.
Got it. So I'm
Yeah.
curious. I know obviously athlete from age of 8 and doing all of that. Was your undergrad anything related to sciences, or was the undergrad something different?
Yeah, so my undergrad at Oshkosh is kinesiology, and then I had an
Got it.
emphasis in exercise and fitness.
Got it. So yeah, you've kind of been
Yep.
on this career pathway.
Yeah.
Maybe didn't
Yeah. I
necessarily
didn't
know where
know
it's going
what
to
I wanted
lead,
to
but
do. Yeah, I knew I liked health. I thought I wanted to do dietetics.
mm,
And then I took one chemistry class, and I was like, absolutely not. I don't need to do this, so let's switch.
got it.
So just kind of continued from there.
Yeah, chemistry has
Yeah.
done that to a couple of students, I think, along the way. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It got me. Yeah.
all
Yep.
right. So let's talk personal training. Let's go ahead and dive into that a little
hmm
bit. So, how did you end up making the decision to pursue personal training as a career pathway?
Yeah, so this was kind of interesting. So I ended up moving to Virginia, with my boyfriend. He is going to VCU. So whenever I moved here, I kind of just didn't have a plan, which is very unlike me, where I was like, okay, I'll go there and just find a job. I'll see what it does, or I'll see what I do. Originally I thought I wanted to do medical sales.
Hmm,
But with that being said, it was right when COVID hit. And so being in hospitals and stuff during that time, I was like, that just sounds miserable. Like all of the regulations are even more than normal. So that just sounded awful. I ended up actually applying to the job I have now on Indeed. Um, And it really just worked out. So I even had my boss message me while I was still in Georgia before I had moved. I had the interview set up for once I got to Virginia, and then it kind of just spiraled from there. I didn't know originally that I wanted to do it, to be honest. I kind of like, not that I didn't like it, I just was like, there's not really that much money in it. Like, I don't know how these personal trainers really make a living. Um, but my boss has actually done a really good job with how he structures everything. And then I would say I kind of fell into it and then found a love for it
Hmm.
instead of sort of the opposite. So I think a lot of people, you know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
kind of the reverse of what I just said. So but yeah, the clients are great. I mean, I have 400 members, roughly 400 members at one location. I also train at another location. So all in all, I see probably over 600 faces throughout the week or throughout the month. We do focus meetings, so I really get to see them on that like one-on-one level and actually build relationships. And just seeing the impact overall that I didn't really realize I think was going to initially happen whenever I first got the job. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. That's really cool. A lot of there's the follow your passion kind of a thing, but
Yeah.
Mark Cuban, who people are quite familiar with, has
Mhm.
a little bit of a different take, and it's almost more of what happened to you, which is find something and get really good at it, and then once you're really good at it, you'll find you'll be passionate about it, right? And
Right.
so,
Yeah. And I
kind of
actually
different
would
ways
say
to get
that's
there.
probably what happened. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's kind of cool. So, what did success look like originally for you when you kind of started, and has that changed at all, or success kind of look in the same way?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, I feel like success, I wanted to have money. I
Hey,
wanted to be able
totally.
to provide for myself. Um, so obviously if you're in a relationship, then like you can kind of have that support, but I still wanted to be able to provide for myself. So I would say initially that's sort of what I wanted. That hasn't changed too much. Like I still want to be able to provide for myself, even though when he graduates, like we'll have that dual income. But as far as how it's changed. I've gotten maybe or not maybe, I definitely have gotten a little bit less money oriented, but that's still like, I would say the clients drive me. I really enjoy helping them. But then, I mean, financially, like, I want to be able to, like, continue growing in that regard
Yeah.
as well. Yeah.
Well, and let's be real. I mean, the reality for most folks is that they need to earn an income to be able to live a style of life
Yeah.
and all of that. And it's not
Right.
getting any less expensive, which is actually why there's so much more interest in side hustle. Or honestly, in a lot of ways, what we see is absolutely a necessity. Somebody's working a full time job, but they need an extra $1,000 or $1,500
Right.
a month, and the
Hmm.
side hustle often will allow them to continue to work the full time job and have a medical insurance or whatever it is. But then this hustle can kind of help them get through the month or do some special things. And so, yeah, money is necessary. So totally
Yeah,
nothing wrong
yeah.
on
I
that
was like, I
side
wish I
there.
had a better answer for that because it's definitely not
Yeah,
the my only drive, but it's definitely like when people say it's not part of it, I'm like, I don't think you've ever had no money to say that it's not important to
right.
you. That doesn't
Yeah,
really make me sense. I will say it's funny, whenever you asked me about it, I was like, do I have any other like side hustles? And we do. I wish I could do it more. And I think eventually I will. But I love like refurbishing finish or like redoing furniture
yeah,
on like Facebook Marketplace. So I've
yeah.
done it a couple times where like the dressers we have now, we just moved in, got rid of one. I sold that one for more. And I was like, man, if I could do this more. I mean, I like doing stuff like that too.
Yeah, it's cool that you say that because actually, with folks that I talk about or talk to in the Start the Thing show here, that almost always is the case. So
Oh,
we'll be
really?
talking about a side hustle and we're like, oh yeah, I also
Right.
do this and I do this and I do this. So it's
Yeah.
interesting because I think that people that are attracted to the side hustle are doing it for a reason. A lot of times there's a financial component to it, but then there's also just this desire to kind of say, hey, can I do this too? Or can I do that? Especially when
Yeah.
somebody sees some success, they're like, well, I was able to step out and I was able to do that. What would it look like
Hmm.
if I tried something different? Or maybe, like you were saying, personal training really started out of a need for money, not of a necessarily a need for passion. And sometimes there's a passion area that then becomes that side hustle too. So we could talk a
Right.
whole bunch on that side. But let me
Yeah.
let me see on personal training a little bit besides the monetary point. All right. So what are some of the parts about personal training that bring you joy?
As far as bringing me joy, I would say the members do a lot of times. With that being said, sometimes there are some members that don't bring me so much joy, but I would say most of them do bring me joy. And a lot of the members too, like they just have certain situations that you can help them out in, and how they come back and they're like, "Wow, you really helped me with that." Sometimes it's something that I'm like, "Wow, I didn't even realize I said anything that really was that impactful."
Yeah.
And then they come back and they're like, no, this helped me do this. Sometimes it's as simple as like posting something on Instagram. I reposted something this morning and like two people messaged me and were like, oh my gosh, I just did this, yada, 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 yada. So it's crazy how sometimes I think the things I think are going to be the most impactful like aren't. And then the
Yeah.
other way too. Like sometimes I'm like, wow, really that like helped you out, which that's always nice. That's always nice as well.
Yeah.
And that just goes back to me as well. Where just like the little things I try to think about a little bit more conscientiously like each thing I'm doing where I'm like this could be very impactful for one person here today, and because I see so many people I'm like okay, even if I don't want to say this in my cool down, even if I don't want to say this some like drink your water, make sure you're getting 100 ounces, are you eating enough protein. Sometimes I'm like I've said this so much, but if that can help one or two people or three people that day, I'm like you know
Yeah.
what, like that's worth it, I should do that.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
And so, total transparency here too, and you know this, but my wife has been in the health and fitness industry too.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of those things where uh, just being kind is something that
Yeah.
could go so far too. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's before you get into the workout or after you get into the workout, just kind of
Hmm.
speaking life into somebody's circumstances or whatever it is. And yes, the workout was great, but it's that ability to kind of speak into somebody's life in a tough moment too. And I think sometimes when people are working out, there's a vulnerability that is there that I think is
Yeah.
kind of neat to see. And then you're able to help people sometimes when they're coming out of kind of really challenging life circumstances like surgeries or injuries or whatever it is. And you're a smiling face and somebody who's helping
Hmm.
them to get back to kind of the strength that they want to or the whatever that new normal might be. And so I would imagine some of that too of seeing people come in and are recovering and then 6 months later they've been with you and working with them and all of a sudden you see like wow, this person really has significantly improved their quality of life.
Yeah, well, and I think you're so right with saying like you brought up a good point with saying just like being kind. And so many people are just missing that small aspect that's actually huge. Like people just don't take that part seriously. Um, and that's just a shame. That's just really a shame because I would say especially people that they're the people that come into the gym that have already been to the gym. You know what I mean? Like there's the people that have been going and going and going and they know what they're doing. And yes, you have to be kind to them, but it's the people that have never stepped foot in the gym before that are super nervous, that are coming back postpartum, that are super self-conscious about their body. And you're like, no, like you're doing a great job. Like way to show up today. And those are the people that I would say I'm more like that's the part that brings me joy. Going back to your other question, where yes, the athletes show up and that's great, but I've worked with athletes all my life. They're disciplined, you know?
Yeah.
So that's really cool. But the people that are getting out of bed whenever they have zero clue what they're doing, they know they're going to be sore the next day, probably for the next 3 days, and they're still choosing to show up and work out with you. Like that's amazing. And that's, I mean, great for them.
Yeah. Keeps the
Yeah.
motivation for you up to get up at
Yeah.
4 o'clock in the morning to
Yeah.
go there and serve those folks.
Exactly.
So I'm assuming, and probably a pretty safe assumption here, that it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There's challenges that come in with being a personal trainer. And you said
Right.
you already said some clients bring you joy, some don't. And I'm glad you didn't name names because we don't want names
Right.
out here, you know.
No,
But
no,
what
no.
are
Yeah.
what are some of the bigger challenges that you've had as you've kind of gotten started and been a personal trainer?
So mine might be a little bit different than other personal trainers' answers. So the gym I work at, we say personal training in a group setting.
Uh,
So just to clarify, like I'm not working one-on-one with members. I'm working like 15 people, 20, 30, 40 people. So I would say different challenges with that. I'm also the manager at my facility or my gym. So I would say more on like a managerial aspect. Yeah, you have to deal with people having a bad day. That just kind of is what it is. Like I don't take offense to that. I think some
yeah,
people do. Some of my employees do whenever they come in and they're like, "This member is just in a bad day." Like you have bad days too. I mean,
sure.
that's just human nature. Um, I would say for me, some of the more challenges are like accounting questions whenever they don't read the contract, or like they didn't do certain things like on time whenever they were supposed to. So that's more like from my perspective, the human aspect is sort of just part of it, and that really doesn't bother me as much. I mean, I've been working here for yeah, this will be my third year. And I think I've only ever had two like terrible experiences. And one, she called me and accused me of like lying on the phone. And I was like, well, this is not good. But once again, those are so few and far between
Yeah,
that like the human aspect I really don't have a problem with as much. It's more the like the managerial stuff is sometimes I'm like, and I like it, I don't mind it, but that's the stuff that's more challenging, I would say.
yeah, totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's Lots of people, lots of different opinions, ways to do different kinds of things, and sometimes
Yeah.
people want to voice those opinions, and so yeah, leadership can be a little bit tricky.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, what about growth? I would assume that this is something where there's so much that's kind of learned and new knowledge that's there. So how do you continue to grow as a personal trainer?
So I would say continuing to grow, I mean, I continue to do like kind of educational kind of things. So I feel like I could go so many directions with this question. One thing that I didn't realize I'd be so interested in, originally was kind of like the postpartum aspect. So like
Mm,
women's health, pelvic floor, like coming back postpartum, how is that impactful? So in ways I've continued to grow was learning more about that. And that's just kind of like one avenue of that. Another way is so looking back to kind of just how much I've grown. Whenever I first started, I've always been kind, but I maybe didn't know how to like direct it as well. So I feel like I've done a lot better job in the last couple years of kind of learning individual people and how like different personalities and how can I help this person the most based off of their personality. So now, okay, I've got to know you a couple weeks. Like how can I push you to be your best because it's probably not going to be the same as the person next to you or the person next, you know what I mean?
yeah.
So something else in that regard. And I think that skill just continues to get better, I would hope, where you just kind of continue to learn people's personalities. So I would hope that I kind of can continue expanding on that. But I definitely think that's one of my biggest growths that I've had in the last couple of years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you think about it, it's a people business, right? And so,
Yes, it is.
understanding
Exactly.
different personality
Yep.
types and how they show up and what motivates them, I think that's such a interesting thing that I honestly hadn't really thought about until you were kind of talking about it. And
Yeah.
again, talking to my own wife, who's been in the field for 20 years, it makes so much sense. But I also
Yeah.
love the part that you were saying that there's the term niche, right? And so, in some ways,
Hmm.
not saying that postpartum and that kind of thing would become a niche, but it's interesting to see sometimes how personal trainers will kind of go to a specific population. So, for example, my
Hmm.
wife's business and her kind of where she's at now, she really finds working with older adults is really
Yeah.
where she finds a lot of joy. And so, working with older seniors that are working on balance and memory and life skill kinds of things has really become a spot that she likes. Is that something that's common where you kind of see across the industry where personal trainers I think when you think about it, a lot of times it's a person that's pushing and motivating somebody individually, but it's actually more than that, where personal
Mhm.
trainers can really kind of get in and figure out where they want to continue to learn, and then they go kind of more towards a specialty. Is that actually more common than what people might think?
I would think so. I also would hope so. Like, if you don't like doing something, you don't have to do it. You know what I mean? So, if someone, like, on the flip side, doesn't like working with elderly population, I would hope that they would choose to take a step back and not do that. The same thing I just said about postpartum care, I actually found the same thing because me and Lindsay used to work in the same summer.
Yeah,
That was something that whenever I got that graduate assistantship, I was like, okay, questionable. Like, am I gonna like it? I actually really enjoyed that population as well. And that's something that I think a lot of people wouldn't expect. So they'd be like, "Oh, someone's like very young, fresh out of college. Like, why would they want to work with the elderly population?" And they're a really good time. I think it takes a really special person. But yeah, that and postpartum, I would say are like the two. I feel like I really expected to want to work with athletes, and
yeah,
that's like the one where I'm like, no, I could do without, which was really interesting to me to kind of like look back and think that, because I would have never thought that like 10 years ago, where I'd be like,
yeah.
no, I don't want to work with athletes because that's kind of who I thought I would want to work with. And I would say that's probably true for most athletes. Like most athletes think that they want to work with other athletes, and I don't even know. That's probably only true half the time because a lot of athletes kind of branch out.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's cool that when sometimes the folks who are listening to this are trying to think about whether they want to get started doing something, and some of them will be considering personal training. Hopefully, this is an encouragement that it's more than just the person you might see at a Planet Fitness or this membership that's
Yeah.
going in and working with somebody who's lifting a lot of weight and trying to make them sore the next day, as opposed to there's all these different types of populations of people that you can work with, and maybe that'll be an encouragement for somebody. Hopefully, it will be. But if somebody's thinking about being a personal trainer, based on what you know, what are two or three things that you would recommend that they start with, or ways to kind of explore this a little bit more?
Yeah, so, well, number one, I mean, if you have the opportunity to like shadow or anything like that, that would be ideal. So whether they're in school for their bachelor's degree, I know my bachelor's degree had like one of our internship sections was personal training. So you kind of got that little, like you have to dip your toes in a little tiny bit. Obviously, there's the certifications you would have to study for. But I would say the main thing is just kind of like don't be afraid to start. And if you don't like it, then it's not something that takes a huge investment. You're not going to
Right.
go to school for 10 years to be a doctor and then you're like, oh no, I don't like this. So personal training is something you can try it out. Hopefully you get certified or you have to get certified. And then once you start, then we'll see. Hopefully you can find your niche. But there's so many different niches like what you're talking about. So you could do Gen Pop, you could work at like a big time gym, where it's like the $10 a month kind of deal and be a personal trainer there. You could work at more of a boutique gym, do like Orange Theory, a Burn Boot Camp, a Berries, like that kind of thing where you're in that more group setting, something like that. Or you could be that one-on-one where they come to your house. So there's really so many options with that. And I would say the only way to find out what you do like is to try a bunch and figure out what you don't like. And then you can kind of narrow it down for there. But I mean, you probably won't get it right the first time, which is fine. No one expects you to.
Yeah. Yeah. The lines to careers and lines to life are often not direct. There's a lot of
Yeah.
movements and pathways of different things before sometimes folks kind of figure out the thing they want to do. But that actually
Right.
kind of goes into this next question, Alexa. And this might be a little bit tricky. I'll be interested to see how you respond to this one. But if your younger self could see you now, what do you think she would think about this business you're in?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I feel like I talked about that a little bit because like I said, I thought I'd be working with like athletes. Whether that be coaching gymnastics or like on the strength conditioning level at a college. I think my younger self would be proud of me. I don't think they would be like, what the heck are you doing sort of deal. But I think that they probably would be a little bit surprised if I would have told myself 10 years ago, like, okay, in 10 years, you'll be living in Virginia running a gym. Like they'd be like, what
Yeah.
in the world? But with that being said, like I really like where I'm at now.
Yeah.
So, and I feel like that's kind of surprising because I've always been like a really big planner, but anyone with a kinesiology degree or that's kind of in the kinesiology field, I feel like it's kind of gotten a bad rap because you're like, well, what do I do with this now? And that can be true, but it really is just what you make of it.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of opportunities, but you're the one that has to make those opportunities. No one just hands them to you. And that's just true in general.
Yeah.
If you want something, like you have to go out and get it. It's very rarely just like, here, why don't you come work for me and I'll pay you $150,000. Like,
Right.
no, that's probably not going to happen. Like you have to get there by yourself.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
life is fun too, right? If I think if we were to come back together in 10 years and talk about your journey and what it looks like, it
Yeah.
may be in this field, it might be something totally different. I mean,
Right.
that's the
I
part
think
you
we
just
should
never
do
know.
that. We can just set it. So I don't even
Set
know
it for
what
10
what
years
it
from
is
now.
today.
All right.
Yeah.
July 22 of 2033. There we go.
There you go.
We've
Okay.
got an
It's
appointment
set.
scheduled. All right,
Yeah.
we're gonna move to a segment that I absolutely love. I've had some phenomenal mentors in my life, and this is a spot where you've got an opportunity to kind of give a shout out to a mentor. So we call this segment "Thank a Mentor." And so I'm just curious: is there a mentor or two that you want to give a shout out to say thank you, that helped you
Mhm.
get to where you've gotten to today?
Yes. Yes. So, first one that kind of came to mind was my mom, which is, I feel like kind of a cheesy answer, but I'm gonna say it anyway. She well, she's been a stay-at-home mom, but I would say she's like the queen of side hustles. Like whenever I told her I was doing this, she was like, "Did you tell him? Are you gonna tell him that you shoe modeled? Are you gonna tell him that I shoe modeled and made a living out of it? Are you gonna tell him?" And I was like, "I'm probably not gonna tell him all of those things." But she is very big on like I don't want to say she tries and fails because she doesn't fail a lot of times, but she will try. And then if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But listen, I tried, you know?
Yeah.
And so I feel like for me, that was something that was really encouraging to see growing up. And that's also like I saw it from her, but that's also a huge lesson that gymnastics taught me because you fail way more than you succeed. Like you fall and fall and fall. You might finally get the skill, but you failed many, many times first. And that's something that I try to tell a lot of my clients as well, where I'm like, you'll fall on your butt. Like, what's the worst? That's the worst that's gonna happen. We'll be all right, I promise.
Yeah.
And so that would be my first one. And then second one, I loved our master's program. So I wonder how Lindsay would, has Lindsay answered this question?
She's not no.
I'd be curious because I wonder who from our program she would list because I seriously like they were all so good in different ways. Well, mainly I'm thinking of Dr. Casper and then Dr. Webster.
Yeah.
Dr. Casper just cracks me up And I'm still in contact with him, as I'm sure a lot of his previous students are. But he's just great. And then Dr. Webster as well. And he kind of had the same, I feel like, mentality where he's like, just give it a go. What's the worst that can
Yeah.
happen? And so I feel like seeing that just like that pattern all throughout my life, I'm like, you know what? All of these adults that I look up to just tell me to try. So like I guess I'll just try. We'll see how it goes. And so far that's worked out for me. So I think
It's
I'll
going
just
all
keep
right.
that up.
That's too funny. Yeah, I'm fairly confident Dr. Webster would be on Lindsay's list. They've
Yeah.
become pretty close family friends, and
Yeah.
those two like each other quite a bit. And actually, in fact, for my wife's side, she actually started supporting Dr. Webster's father, who was 90 at the time, and so Lindsay
Hmm.
used to go hang out with Dr. Webster's father and do some work. And that was something that I think really kind of started some of this interest for Lindsay with working with older adults. And so, yeah, I think they'd probably be up at the top of that list. But, it's
Yeah, well,
interesting,
I
Alec.
worked with him
Okay.
too.
Yeah.
I think I'm not sure if Lindsay did or I did first. I'm not sure. But in the summer, yeah, I like made him a program, and I would not work out with him, but I would like
Yeah.
help him do balance exercises and things like that. And I agree. I agree. I feel like that probably was one of the initial like that sparked my interest too. Yeah.
Yeah, she used to go over to their house and go for walks with George is his name, and 91-year-old and her out there doing some
Yeah.
strolling around the neighborhood. Some very fond memories of our time in Valdosta.
Yeah.
So one thing that hit me, and it was when you gave the shout out to your mom, which I love, maybe a little cheesy, but also heartfelt, which I think is really cool. After the Super Bowl this year, the quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, Jalen Hurts, said, "You either win or you grow." And I think
Yeah.
that's such a great
Mhm.
kind of phrase to think about what you were talking about when you're talking about your mom is sometimes from the outside, and even with side hustles in general, people will say, "Oh, it's a failure. You didn't accomplish what you wanted to do." But I think when the mindset is, I either win or I learn, or
Yeah.
I win or I grow,
Yeah.
it takes some pressure off too. And so you see all of these different experiences as knowledge that's been gained, and then ultimately at the end of the day, you just kind of keep getting better and better until that kind of right thing aligns, and you have that opportunity. So I thought that's kind of cool about your story with your mom.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's also interesting. A lot of people, like, especially growing up, like, I feel like we put adults in this bubble where you're like, oh, they all have it together. Like, we're all good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you get into the field with adults and you're like, wow, no one has it together.
Right.
No one, does anyone know what we're doing here? And then everyone's like, no, but we all pretend like we do. You're
Yeah.
like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
cool. Let's all do this together. So I feel like
Fake it
that,
till you
once
make
again,
it.
yeah, exactly. Like what you said, like that takes some of the pressure off too, because you're like, well, let's just once again see how it goes. We'll try it out.
Yeah. Well, you
Yeah.
feel more normal, right, when you realize that everybody else is
Yes.
kind of in that same boat,
Right.
kind of learning and
Exactly.
going forward. So, all right. Well, we're
Mhm.
kind of at the end of the conversation here, but I was just curious, anything else that you wanted to share about this journey with personal training that might be beneficial to somebody who's considering starting personal training, either as a side hustle or as a business?
Yeah, I would say if you're considering it, then if you're genuinely interested, give it a go. Because once again, like you said, you'll either learn or you'll either do it or you grow.
Hmm.
Which is great. But make sure you're educated on it. So don't just start it to start it, but make sure you actually know what you're talking about, know the anatomy, because there's so many personal trainers. I don't want to say they're doing more harm than good, but we've gotten some people that have come from some personal trainers that just aren't educated on it. So whatever you're doing, whatever you're starting, do it because you're committed and you're passionate about it, but then also because you're educated on it as well. Yeah,
Yeah. Love
I'd
it.
say it's the main thing.
Love it. Love it. Good stuff there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Start the Thing family. We go faster, we get better, and have more impact when we learn with one another. Thanks so much for sharing your story today, Alexa, and thanks so much for being on the show. If you're watching the show today and it's your first time, we would love for you to drop a comment in or subscribe to the channel. Also, if there's something about Alexa's story that inspired you, feel free to put that in the comments. I think it'd be fun to love on Alexa a little bit for taking some time to spend with
Yeah.
us in the show. Thank you for watching this episode of Start the Thing, and we hope you will come back in a future episode.